Welcome to episode 74 of The Liz McMullen Show. Jill Malone has been on Lizzie's Bedtime Stories, and I'm most excited to welcome her back. So, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me again.
It's groovy.
It's rad groovy.
It's totally rad. You spoke to me by doing what you're doing because your book was in 1990 in the Giraffe People, and it was set in the exact time when I was in high school.
Nice. All right.
So I was like, hey, I was almost your character's age. Like I started high school in 1990, so I was a freshman, not a sophomore. But I was like, this is so funny.
I actually did a reading where this woman stood up and said, "Oh, I love this recent historical fiction." And I was like, "Are you serious?" She was like 18 or something. I mean, it was just it was
Recent
kind of
historical?
eye-opening. Yeah, recent historical fiction. Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Ow.
it's interesting to think about how many people have no idea that there was this first Persian Gulf War. You know, that's one of those things that we're like, what? That happened and we didn't go in and invade. We did that later. Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah. Us the liberators. I won't.
Yeah,
We won't. We
yeah.
won't go all political in this episode because it's all about the love. Can you give just a little, summary blurby thing about your book? And it's a YA novel, young adult.
Right, which is something that still surprises me a little bit, but yes, it's about a girl whose father is a chaplain, and he runs the chaplain school in New Jersey. And she has come to that moment in her life where she starts to individuate. She
Mm-hmm.
really gets that she's different from her parents, and her belief system is different, and her value system is different. And that's coming at a really important time because she's met this girl she has feelings for that she doesn't understand. And if she followed the the education that her parents gave her, she couldn't even conceive of this relationship. But luckily she doesn't. You know, she has her own viewpoint. And the girl is also the girl of Megan in the story is given the job of sort of guiding this girl, of being her mentor. And so that ends up being really interesting because I think Megan has a very particular honor system. I don't think it's honor in the way that we think of honor, because she does a lot of things that really aren't okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she does have a sense of honor, and so she's trying to figure out a way to communicate with this girl she's supposed to be mentoring in this family that disapproves of anything gay at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so they come up with these vocabulary lists, and that's really the way that the story is.
Well, you have a vocabulary word for each title, and the other
Right.
thing that I have a question, and I'm not uncomfortable with it, but I imagine was there a lot of backlash with lesbian readers because a lot of the book starts out with the character not only being straight but in straight relationships and intimacy, and like I was like, when is it gonna get gay?
Right. Well, I think there's that constant problem um, with books that I've written, because there was the same complaint about Red Audrey and the Roping, about can a character have relationships with men and still be considered a lesbian, or at that point is she bisexual? I mean, you start to get outside of the context of the story because you're trying to figure out what kind of story this is sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
there definitely was a lot of argument about whether or not this character is in fact a lesbian, because her realization comes so late. And is she even coming out? I mean, she comes to terms with herself. It's an internal coming out story, but she hasn't gone out and told her parents, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And so there wasn't backlash about it, but there's been a lot of conversation about it. And there was even with my publishers. They weren't really feeling hey, this is a story about a lesbian kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that ultimately I did persuade them to it because I think Cole's voice is really compelling, and I think that it's also really familiar. You know, you I think the frustrating thing sometimes about being a lesbian is that the people around you realize it first. You know, they
Hmm.
get it before you do. And
Well,
that's
there's
hard.
like the constant issues with why am I blanking on her name? The friend that the mother wouldn't let her sleep in the same room with her.
Right, Kelly.
With
Right.
Kelly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like all these little signs that other people are like, there's a little gay going on in this girl, and it
Right.
may not occur to her, but they're
Right.
like,
That's exactly it though, right? Because she's feeling really alone and alienated, and everyone else is just like, oh, wow, yeah, you're totally gay, kid. You're super gay. That's what's going on here. And she's just like, what's going on here? I just don't get it. And I think that that's something that I hope has changed for kids because
mhm.
I presented Giraffe People to a gay straight alliance at a middle school, and these kids totally got it. They really got it. They were in this community where they were supportive of each other. They were a safe environment. They kept reminding each other that it was a safe environment and they could share whatever they felt comfortable with. um, I can't even imagine something like that when I was in middle school.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I had an interesting experience in that, my parents were hippies and they were very liberal until, that whole Not in My Backyard. They were very liberal. My mom introduced me to Armistead Maupin books, which are about San Francisco, and they're gay boys in it galore. But when I came out as bisexual to them, well, now I consider myself a lesbian, but at the time I came out bisexual because that's how I felt.
Right.
And my mother was horrified. And when I moved in with my first girlfriend, it was like the end of the world for the two of them. It was very rough. And I was like, this is so strange because, like, I don't have conservative parents. They're not, like, highly Catholic. They're not the type of people you would expect this from. It just kind of shocked the fuck out of me. Um,
Yeah, I can see how that would, because I mean, you're expecting that if anyone's safe to come out to, it's parents who are liberal,
yeah.
and
It's,
that's got to be really terrible when
it,
they've
you
been
know,
telling
it,
you all
it,
this great stuff all along, and then they're not supporting it in their life.
for a while it actually broke me. I'll be honest with that. And
No, I totally understand
it
that.
sorry?
I can totally understand that. I mean, my parents, they were supposed to come around. That's what I thought. I thought that in the end they would love me more than they loved this idea that I was going to hell. But it just wasn't true. They never came around.
And the
And that,
funny thing is, my parents did come around, and the oddest thing is that my partner trans identifies, female to male, not going to transition, but for personal reasons that she has. But they love Ilya. They love her like crazy, and it's just like, what a bizarre thing to accept. And I would never have predicted it, but now Ilya has a closer relationship with my parents than I do, and I'm happy with that. That's fine by me.
yeah.
But yeah, I want to, tug it back to your writing a little bit. One of the things that I find unique about you is your use of language. It's like I can tell that you really love language by reading your books, and it's unusual and it's funny and quirky, and it totally amps up the angst. And sometimes it's easy to in a young adult YA novel to kind of, I don't know, be melodramatic about a teenager, or, have cardboard cutout people who are like kind of stereotypes, like the cheerleader type who's like lovable and, all that kind of crap.
Right.
And not only that was not problematic about your writing, but there were so many things that were idiomatic that I'm like, unless you lived through it as a teenager, you would not relate to it in the same way that I did. I was like, all the different things, like the bands, the music, the songs, mixtapes, and all sorts of stuff, like the kind of grunge, punk rock, thing going on, and all of that. I was like, ding, 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 and I was like, I honestly. I know a lot of people who do historical or do period work or whatever do research about something that they may have not personally lived through, but I'm not sure the things that you knew were things that somebody who was not of that generation could have known.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. No, I think that that's true, that you really just had to live it. And what's been really interesting is how much pushback there's been about the music. There was a lot of pushback about the music, and some people have been really upset about how much the music is part of the story. And I think part of it was that they were reading her music as heavy metal, and just because they didn't recognize the grunge or the punk.
Uh-huh.
And so then that gave them a totally different impression of her
Huh.
from how I wrote her, because she's not heavy metal at all. In fact, there's a war that goes on in one of the concerts between the punk band and the heavy metal audience. But she has a very punk sensibility, and she had to, she had to survive in her family. So the music was actually the way I got into the character. That was the most important thing for me, that she was in this band and that she did it despite the fact that she was a really good athlete.
And the funny thing is, I didn't even take her as punk or a punk sensibility. I just felt her as a teen. I felt like she was a good kid, great athlete, interesting sensibility point of view, not like as artistic as Bangs. And like I saw her almost as if she, as a chameleon, can kind of fit into different worlds, like as a jock or as a musician. Like from the guy who was teaching her guitar to being in the band that she was in, and her way of relating to the world and seeing people. And I dug it. I dug her a lot, but I didn't see her as punk rock. Whereas, did you ever read Punk Like Me?
No, I haven't read Punk Like Me. Who
Oh,
wrote that one?
J.D. Glass.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll check that out.
Oh yeah, you totally have to. And that is like if you want to have like punk and musician and edge and all that kind of stuff, because JD is a musician in addition to being, a really talented author. And she has a series that, that follows the different characters, and she has different focuses for each novel. Like my favorite books of her is Punk Like Me, and I believe the other one is Red Light or something like that. And she also has spirituality stuff in there and comic books, and once again, these are like touching on notes that I'm familiar with. Like I remember, my brother is 4.5 years older than me, and I remember him throwing parties at the shore house, and girls singing along to Please Please Do Not Go or A Blister in the
Okay.
Sun. And
Awesome.
I was like this little interlocutor because I was in an elementary school, but I was able to blend in some instances and just like watch all the stuff, and actually in the traditional romance that I'm working on, where it's left unspoken, when Rowan is introduced to Desiree, they're in a bar, in Northampton, and she and her friends are singing Blister in the Sun.
Oh, that's so cool. Right on.
So when I
We
was like,
totally did
Violent
that in
Femmes,
college.
rock
That's all we
on.
did. We went to karaoke and did Violent Femmes. It was so fun.
That's killer. That is totally killer. It's awesome. I never, like, there's like some kind of idiom in here that I never heard before. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was Sonic or something. Am I?
Yeah, I invented that, is what I
Okay,
was
because
saying.
I'd never heard that before. I was like, I never heard that before.
I wanted him to say something like groovy that wasn't groovy, so I came up with Sonic. And it's funny because now I say it all the time too, and it's one of those words that when you say it really, you can feel it.
It's your
It
own
was the first word that
onomatopoeia.
I really saw him. He's the kind of kid who would say, "That's Sonic," and you would just be like nodding. Yes, yes, it is. Yes. I love him. I love Bangs. He's such a great guy. He's
Oh
the perfect
yeah.
friend for her.
Oh yeah, totally. One of the first things that I highlighted, because like this is so teenager, so I'm gonna read your own work back to you, so don't laugh at me when I fuck it up. Um, okay, so this is early on. It's actually page 11 for my book, but that's because I have the ebook, so I can manipulate it.
Okay.
Megan's 18, just missed getting into West Point. Instead of going to Princeton on a ROTC scholarship, she enrolled in West Point Prep in military lingo, United States Preparatory School, blah, 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 to try and qualify for an entrance to West Point next fall. She's our cadet. My family sponsors her. She refers to us as her patrons, which just means we invite her to meals and outings and take her shopping and watch her play intramural rugby. Like me, she's good at science and English, but thinks math is stupid alien language that is as cruel and unfathomable as corsets and hoop skirts. Actually, she said foot binding, but when I looked up foot binding, I decided math was a little less painful. I was like, oh, I hated geometry. That was the
Me
only.
too. Oh my god, I hated geometry. I still hate geometry.
I sucked. That is, in high school, that is the one math that I blew at. Like I did, I matured in that. Like algebra 1 I wasn't great at, but I kicked ass in algebra 2 and trig. But I couldn't do geometry for the life of me. It was like a foreign language. I just did not understand.
I mean, math is what I do, right? I'm an accountant, and
Oh,
I never have gotten geometry. I just haven't. My brain just doesn't see the world that way. Yeah.
so what kind of feedback have you gotten from this? What are some of your What's the schema of your fans? Do you have a lot of young folks who are interested in it? Is it, has it gotten some crossover to people who might not be into YA, or what kind of
I think it's
feedback have you
gotten a
gotten?
lot of crossover. I'm not sure that everyone who reads it thinks of it as YA. I think a lot of people are kind of surprised that it's skewing that way, but kids are reading it and really digging it, which is awesome because it's of a different time, but it's definitely got that teen voice to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that right, I mean, it's like reading Catcher in the Rye now. You just feel that. You feel what he felt, and it
All
doesn't
those
matter how old the book
phonies.
is. Yeah. I mean, it's just really true. Like seriously, you people should be more authentic. So that's been pretty cool. The most interesting conversations I've had about the book all revolve around consent. And that's been really interesting to play through because I was very careful with how old I made Megan because it was really important to me that she be old enough that there be some gray there. Is that okay? She's not in high school. She's not in college, but she's not in high school. She's in this position where she has more authority. I mean, she's actually watching them over a long weekend at one point. And is that okay that she has a sexual relationship with Cole? And some readers think no, not at all. And some readers think that the fact that they didn't have a conversation before Megan acted is completely out of bounds. And so that's been really cool to talk about because I think consent is one of those conversations we should just have all the time.
Mm-hmm. I love that car scene, though.
Yeah, I do too.
I know you might like it just a little bit. And, it comes as a surprise and not a surprise. And when you're the age that she is, it's like this kind of, you're on the cusp of adulthood. And so, yeah, she looks up at Megan, and Megan is kind of in a different category. But in the scheme of things, as a 37-year-old woman, they're really not that different. They're just slightly, slightly in
Right.
different places. And I've always, because obviously my brother's older than me, and I always had a fascination with his generation, and they were older than me and different, and like, the years mean a lot, but when you're that age. But at the same time, I was like, they're in the car, and I think that, she had some fascination and interest with her, and even though, like, the kiss kind of comes out of nowhere, there's intimacy before the kiss, and if I remember correctly, was it a wet dream that she had about her before this kiss happened, or am I like...
No, there actually was something that happened the night they come back from the show.
Okay.
And it's just not, because they never talk about it, she's never sure how real it is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that really tough gray thing that happens sometimes when you're very young, where you're just not sure if something's real. Like, even if it happened, is it real? Does it mean anything? Because if it doesn't mean anything, then it isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where Cole ends up too often in the book, especially with Megan, is that she ends up questioning whether anything with Megan means what she wants it to mean.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked about the scene in the car is that I feel like so much of the time we just don't have enough courage to act.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, especially I think with queer teens, you don't know if it's okay to act. You know, maybe it hasn't even entered your head that you could act. You know, you haven't even realized that this is a possibility. This person sitting across from you is a possibility for you. And that was always my experience when I was a teenager, because I found girls when I was 15, but I didn't understand what any of that meant. And so I had to, I mean, they had to really just be overt about it. They couldn't be subtle with me at all, because subtlety just, I missed it. I missed that they were even kind of interested in me. And so it was different for me. This notion of, you know, they should have gotten consent first, and they should have, I agree with that to a certain extent. I do agree that,
but they're
all of that has
kids
changed now. But when I was 15, if someone had been like, hey, so I'd like to kiss you, how do you feel about that? I'd be like, are you kidding me? I mean, is this a business meeting? What are you talking about?
I was like, I'm sorry, I just remember from, you know, they're kids. I don't care if
Yeah.
it's, you know, I mean, they're still kids, and you're still on that hormonal figuring out who the hell you are and what you want and how you want it and who, you know, and I think just being a teenager at all is kind of surreal.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, the world is a crazy place, and it doesn't make any sense. And we raise kids saying, hey, there are these rules, and if you follow them, everything will be fine. And then when they're teenagers, they realize you're just a liar. You're a liar. You can follow the rules and nothing's fine. The rules don't mean anything about fine. And that's a big deal, to realize that you know, it's chaos and anarchy out there.
No, totally. And so when I had you on for Lucy's bedtime stories and you read that scene and you did also bring up the concept of consent, then I was like, it didn't once occur to me that there was a consent issue. It's just, you know, they seem to be sharing some erotic space. There was some tension there. There was, you know, of course, like emotions are so crazy when you're even in college, your emotions are all over the place and everything's like the end of the world, or you're just madly in love with somebody, or it's just so tragic, you know. The hormones make things so surreal and crazy, and navigating them is difficult. So I mean, if we were dealing with a 25-year-old woman and a 15-year-old girl or a 16-year-old girl, that'd be different. But honestly, 18 is still a kid, especially when they're not even in college yet. And you just kind of go with what's ever happening, and you learn what's okay with you and what's not okay with you as you're fumbling about as a teenager, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so much of it is just about the power exchange. I mean, if they're exchanging power, it seems to me that that's different from someone just taking advantage of the other person.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
again,
see
that's
it
one of
that
those
way.
things we could argue. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I just, you know, it wasn't like BDSM. It's not like she cuffed her or something.
right, right.
You know, she was
Yeah,
massaging her, she touched her face, was massaging her hair, and then pulled her in for a kiss and straddled her. Like that's a good night.
yeah. I mean, that was my position on it too. But yeah, it's interesting. It's been a really interesting conversation as far as that goes. I mean, it's like the thing in Florida with the senior and the freshman, and I was like, really? I mean, I dated girls in college when I was in high school. Was that wrong? It didn't feel wrong. It felt awesome. So I don't know. I guess my parents would have viewed it as wrong though, but they viewed everything as wrong.
Yeah.
So is that the scale you want to go by?
Well, also, I think a lot of the people who are reading your stuff may be really fucking far away from adolescence.
Right.
And
Right.
28 can be pretty far away from adolescence. So I'm not slamming, you know, I'm not ageist or anything like that. But when you're so far away from the craziness and the way that feels, you know, you think about consents and power and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, no, it's not that serious. They're kids. Um, I want to tailspin us away from this because I really love doing non sequiturs. And it's going back to the concept of language that, you know, things that you were using. And the title of this chapter was ephemeral. And I'm going to do a little quote again and probably fumble over it and piss off my listeners. Anyway, I noticed Leroy had his eyes closed and his head cocked and nodding along as if he could feel it. He's a reverent guy, Leroy. Sometimes when I'm with him, I think I've never really heard music. Anyway, not the way he hears. It shudders through him like Karen Thorne when she's laughing, like maybe he's made of it, composed of music. I loved that. That was really cool.
Thank you.
Did you ever see the film Playing by Heart? It had Angelina Jolie in it.
No.
Awesome film.
Yeah, I gotta check that out.
I
love her.
You know, and this is younger her. This is like her in her early 20s, or my age. She's just a little bit older than me. Anyway, so she's actually she's a really cool cat in the movie, and she's talking to this guy and saying, I've got this friend, and like every time he plays the song, he blows the notes and it sounds different, and I was talking to him about love, and he said to me, talking about love is like dancing about architecture.
I love that. That reminds me of Jack Gilbert poems. He writes poems like that too, where he's talking about one thing, but really it has nothing to do with that thing. It's always about desire. I think that's part of how she's getting through adolescence. Cole is getting through adolescence by finding another language. She's finding vocabulary words that she didn't know before, and she's finding musical notes that she didn't hear before, and she's finding a way to put all these things together and give herself a voice. And it's really spiritual, I think, for her. And what I like about the book is that she's able to feel like she can be loved by her version of God. Mm-hmm. And they're totally square, even if she's queer. Mm-hmm. And I as a kid, I had no concept of that. I thought, if I really do this thing, I'm damned. Mm-hmm. But this thing is awesome, and it's totally worth it. So I'm just going to. But Cole is a smarter person than I am, so she knows that you're not damned. You're awesome, and you should just do this thing because it's awesome.
What do these people think? I'm talking Braille here? That was another good one.
Yeah, she was fun to write. She was very fun to write. Everything is this glib kind of vulnerability. I like that about her. But I mean, you really have a unique voice in your writing, and you have humor, and you have all that kind of stuff, and it's so. I guess it's so signature to you and how you perceive the world and language and whatnot, because we've been introduced to these characters, like even in film, like in Juno, and the acerbic wit of a young woman. But I really like I enjoy the way you swim around in language. It's awesome. Thank you. That's really cool to hear. I appreciate that.
So we've come to the end of our little adventure in. As I like babble on and never let you talk about your work. But it's been great to have you on again. I think Giraffe People is something that could appeal to any age, and it also speaks to young kids in a way that's not looking down at them or creating characters of them. And one of my final thoughts about it was it made me think of the cult hit Heathers, which came out when I was in high school.
Yeah, me too. Awesome.
That movie was epic.
Yeah. It was a whole new kind of dark, It really was. It was great.
So yeah, it was awesome. I loved having you on the show. Probably have you on again sometime in the future. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Liz. I appreciate it.